The morning sunlight filtered through the curtains as Natalie Rivers stood before her bedroom mirror, smoothing down her navy blue dress for the fifth time. Today marked the beginning of her dream job at Sterling Creative Agency, one of the most prestigious design firms in the city. She had spent 3 years working at smaller companies, building her portfolio, and now her talent had finally been recognized. Natalie tucked a strand of her dark brown hair behind her ear and smiled at her reflection. The dress was perfect for a first impression. Conservative, yet stylish, it showed her professionalism while hinting at her creative personality. She grabbed her leather portfolio bag, checked that her resume copies were inside, and headed out the door of her small apartment. The subway ride felt longer than usual. Natalie watched the stations pass by, mentally rehearsing her introduction. She wanted to seem confident, but not arrogant, creative, but reliable. Sterling Creative Agency was known for its innovative campaigns for major brands, and she desperately wanted to prove she belonged there. When she emerged from the underground station, the sky was still clear. The weather forecast had mentioned possible showers later, but Natalie had dismissed it. The sun was shining brightly, and she felt invincible. She walked the 3 blocks to the agency building, admiring the modern glass structure that reached 15 stories high. The lobby took her breath away. Marble floors reflected the natural light pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows. A massive, abstract sculpture dominated the center of the space, and the reception desk curved like a wave in polished white stone. Natalie approached the receptionist, announced her arrival, and was directed to the 8th floor. Her new supervisor, Patricia Morgan, greeted her warmly. The older woman had kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that Natalie appreciated immediately. Patricia gave her a tour of the creative department, introducing her to various team members. Everyone seemed friendly and genuinely excited to have fresh talent joining them. The morning passed in a blur of orientation materials, system passwords, and company policies. Natalie met her fellow designers, learned about current projects, and felt her excitement growing with each passing hour. During lunch, she joined several colleagues in the cafeteria, listening to their stories about memorable campaigns and challenging clients. Around 3 in the afternoon, Patricia called a team meeting to discuss an upcoming pitch for a luxury car brand. Natalie listened intently, absorbing every detail. When Patricia asked for initial ideas, Natalie hesitated only a moment before sharing a concept about contrasting urban landscapes with natural beauty. Several people nodded approvingly, and she felt a surge of confidence. As the meeting wrapped up, Natalie glanced out the window and noticed the sky had changed dramatically. Dark clouds rolled in from the west, turning the afternoon into premature twilight. She remembered leaving her umbrella at home and silently cursed her optimism. By 5:30, most people were packing up to leave. Natalie finished organizing her new workspace, wanting everything perfect for tomorrow. She was one of the last to head toward the elevators. When the doors opened on the ground floor, she heard the unmistakable sound of heavy rain pounding against the building. The lobby had transformed into a waiting area filled with employees staring glumly at the downpour outside. Natalie joined them, watching sheets of rain create rivers in the streets. Thunder rumbled overhead, and lightning occasionally lit up the darkened sky. After 20 minutes, the rain showed no signs of stopping. Natalie checked her phone and saw that her usual subway line was experiencing delays due to flooding. She made a quick decision. Her apartment was only 8 blocks away. If she ran fast enough, she could make it home before getting too wet. She pushed through the revolving door and immediately regretted her choice. The rain was not just heavy, but violent. Within 3 steps, she was drenched. Water poured down her face, blurring her vision. Her carefully styled hair plastered against her head. The navy blue dress that had looked so professional this morning now clung to her body like a second skin, outlining every curve. Natalie tried to shield herself with her portfolio bag, but it was useless. Her shoes filled with water, making each step awkward and splashing. She could barely see where she was going through the curtain of rain. After half a block, she realized continuing was pointless. She turned back toward the building, running as fast as her waterlogged shoes would allow. Bursting back through the revolving door, Natalie stood in the lobby, dripping enormous puddles onto the pristine marble floor. She was breathing hard, shivering despite the warm building temperature. Her makeup ran down her cheeks in dark streaks. The dress had become almost transparent in places, and she quickly crossed her arms over her chest. That was when she realized she was not alone. At least a dozen employees still waited in the lobby, and every single one of them was staring at her. She heard whispers and saw people nudging each other, pointing in her direction. Her face burned with humiliation, despite the cold water dripping from her hair. The elevator at the far end of the lobby dinged, and the doors slid open. A tall figure stepped out, and the whispers immediately stopped. Natalie looked up and felt her heart skip. Jonathan Hayes, the CEO and founder of Sterling Creative Agency, stood there in an impeccable charcoal suit. She recognized him from the company website and the industry magazines that frequently featured him. At 38, he had built the agency from nothing into a powerhouse. He was known for his brilliant creative vision, his demanding standards, and his intensely private personal life. His steel gray eyes swept across the lobby, taking in the scene. When his gaze landed on Natalie, something flickered across his face. For a moment, time seemed to stop. She stood there, shivering and mortified, while he looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Then his jaw tightened. He turned to address the entire lobby, and his voice carried a sharp edge of authority that made everyone straighten instinctively. "Everyone leave now." The command was absolute. People scrambled for the doors, suddenly willing to brave the rain rather than face their CEO's obvious displeasure. Within moments, the lobby emptied, except for Natalie and Jonathan. The security guard discreetly moved to the far side of his desk, pretending to be absorbed in paperwork. Jonathan walked towards her with measured steps. Each footfall echoed in the sudden silence. Natalie couldn't move, couldn't even think clearly. She just stood there dripping and shivering as he approached. When he reached her, he stopped just a few feet away. Up close, she could see the sharp angles of his face, the intensity in his eyes, the controlled power in his stance. Without breaking eye contact, he removed his suit jacket in one smooth motion. "Arms up," he said quietly. Natalie blinked, confused. "What?" "Put your arms up, Natalie." Hearing her name from his lips sent an unexpected jolt through her. She raised her arms slowly, and he draped his jacket over her shoulders. The fabric was warm from his body heat and carried a subtle scent of cedar and something uniquely him. The jacket swallowed her smaller frame, providing coverage and warmth. His fingers brushed her bare shoulders as he adjusted the jacket, and Natalie felt goosebumps rise that had nothing to do with being cold. She saw his throat move as he swallowed, his hands lingering a moment longer than necessary before he stepped back. "Thank you," she whispered, pulling the jacket tighter around her. "You cannot go home like this," Jonathan said, his voice rougher than before. "I will drive you."
Natalie opened her mouth to protest, but the look in Jonathan's eyes stopped her. It was not a request or even a suggestion. It was a decision he had already made, and something in his expression told her that arguing would be pointless. Besides, the thought of riding the flooded subway in her current state made her stomach turn. "I don't want to be any trouble," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. Jonathan's expression softened slightly, though his jaw remained set. "You're not trouble. Wait here." He walked to the security desk and spoke briefly with the guard before returning to her side. He placed his hand lightly on her lower back, guiding her toward a private elevator she had not noticed before. The touch was professional, yet somehow intimate, sending warmth through the damp fabric of her dress. The elevator opened directly into an underground parking garage. Unlike the public lot she had seen during her tour, this area was smaller and much more exclusive. Only a handful of vehicles occupied the space, each one clearly expensive. Jonathan led her to a sleek black sedan that looked like something from a luxury car advertisement. He opened the passenger door for her, and Natalie slid into the leather seat, immediately grateful for the heated surface beneath her. The interior smelled like new leather mixed with his cologne. She sank into the seat as Jonathan closed her door gently and walked around to the driver's side. The engine started with barely a whisper of sound. Jonathan adjusted the climate control, directing warm air toward her. "What's your address?" Natalie gave him her street and apartment number, watching as he programmed the information into the navigation system. His hands moved with practiced confidence over the controls, and she found herself noticing small details about him. The way his dark hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour, the strong line of his jaw, the barely visible scar near his left eyebrow that somehow made him more intriguing rather than less attractive. The car glided up the ramp and into the stormy streets. Rain hammered against the windshield, and the wipers worked overtime to clear the view. The city lights blurred into streaks of color through the water. Inside the car, the silence felt heavy with unspoken words. "I'm sorry about today," Natalie said, finally, unable to bear the quiet any longer. "This wasn't exactly how I imagined my first day ending." "You have nothing to apologize for," Jonathan replied, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "The weather is unpredictable. Still, having the CEO personally drive me home because I looked like a drowned cat in front of everyone is pretty mortifying." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost forming a smile. "You didn't look like a drowned cat." "Then what did I look like?" The question hung in the air between them. Jonathan's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel, and Natalie noticed the tension in his shoulders. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. "Like someone who needed help." It was not the answer she expected, and something about the way he said it made her chest feel tight. She turned to look out the window, watching the rain-soaked city pass by. They drove through neighborhoods she knew well, past the corner store where she bought groceries and the small park where she sometimes sketched on weekends. "Patricia tells me you have an impressive portfolio," Jonathan said, breaking the silence again. "I've worked hard to get here. Sterling Creative has been my goal for years." "What drew you to us specifically?" She considered the question carefully. "Your campaign for Meridian Hotels last year. The way you captured the feeling of belonging rather than just showing luxury accommodations. It was storytelling through design, not just advertising. That's what I want to create." Jonathan glanced at her briefly, and she saw genuine interest in his expression. "That campaign was particularly meaningful to me. My mother worked as a housekeeper at a hotel when I was growing up. She would tell me about the guests and their stories. I wanted to honor that perspective." The personal revelations surprised Natalie. Everything she had read about Jonathan Hayes focused on his business success and creative genius, but little was known about his background. He was famously private, rarely giving interviews and never discussing his personal life. "Did she see the campaign before it launched?" Natalie asked gently. "No, she passed away when I was 19. His voice was steady, but carried an undercurrent of old pain. "But I like to think she would have been proud." "I'm sure she would have been incredibly proud," Natalie said softly. "You've built something amazing." They fell into a more comfortable silence after that, the earlier tension replaced with something warmer. Natalie found herself relaxing into the seat, the jacket still wrapped around her shoulders. The scent of it was comforting somehow, making her feel safe despite the storm raging outside. "You're shivering less," Jonathan observed. "The heat is helping, and your jacket. Thank you again for that. Keep it as long as you need." Natalie watched the rain create patterns on the window. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why did you make everyone leave the lobby? You could have just walked past." Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as if he was choosing his words carefully. Because they were treating you like entertainment instead of a colleague who needed assistance. It was disrespectful. You barely know me. I'm just a new employee. You're a person who deserved better than being stared at and gossiped about during a difficult moment. His voice had an edge to it now, as if the memory of those staring faces still angered him. I don't tolerate that kind of behavior in my company. Something in Natalie's chest warmed at his words. She had expected many things from this job, but she had never imagined the CEO himself would defend her dignity so fiercely. Most executives she had worked with in the past barely knew the names of junior employees, let alone cared about their comfort. "You're different than I expected," she said without thinking. "How so?" "The articles make you sound intimidating and distant, but you're actually kind." Jonathan's laugh was short and slightly bitter. "I'm not kind, Natalie. I'm practical. Good employees are valuable, and creating a respectful work environment is good business." But Natalie did not believe that was the whole truth. She had seen something in his eyes when he looked at her in the lobby, something that went beyond practical business sense. It had looked almost like concern, perhaps even protectiveness. The navigation system announced they were approaching her street. Natalie felt an unexpected disappointment that the drive was ending. Despite the unusual circumstances, she had enjoyed talking with Jonathan. He was intelligent and thoughtful in ways that went beyond his professional reputation. "This is my building," she said as they pulled up to a modest apartment complex. The rain had finally begun to ease slightly, though it still fell steadily. Jonathan parked for Decasset.
Natalie barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jonathan's intense gray gaze looking at her in the dim light of his car. She replayed their conversation over and over, analyzing every word, every pause, every moment of unexpected connection. By the time her alarm went off at 6 in the morning, she had convinced herself that she was reading too much into a simple act of kindness from her boss. She chose her outfit carefully that morning. A burgundy blouse paired with black slacks and sensible flats. Professional, put together, and completely unremarkable. She wanted to fade into the background today, to let yesterday's embarrassment become a distant memory for everyone who had witnessed it. Jonathan's jacket hung on her bedroom chair, freshly steamed to remove any wrinkles. She had considered having it professionally cleaned, but that would take time, and she wanted to return it quickly. The sooner she gave it back, the sooner she could stop thinking about how it had made her feel protected and cared for in a way she had not experienced in years. The subway ride to work was uneventful. The morning sun shone brightly, as if yesterday's storm had never happened. Natalie clutched the garment bag containing Jonathan's jacket and tried to plan what she would say when she returned it. Something brief and professional. A simple thank you without any hint of the confusing emotions swirling inside her. When she arrived at the building, several colleagues from yesterday were already in the lobby. A few of them glanced her way, and Natalie braced herself for awkward comments or questions. But to her surprise, they simply smiled and greeted her normally, as if nothing unusual had happened. Patricia was already at her desk when Natalie reached the creative department. The older woman looked up with a warm smile. "Natalie, good morning. Feeling better after yesterday's adventure?" "Much better, thank you. I'm sorry about the drama." Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "Please, we've all had embarrassing moments. Last year, I spilled an entire cup of coffee on myself right before a client presentation. These things happen." Natalie felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. She settled into her workspace and tried to focus on the orientation materials she still needed to review. But her eyes kept drifting to the garment bag hanging on the back of her chair. Around 10 o'clock, she made a decision. She would take the jacket to the executive floor and leave it with Jonathan's assistant. Clean, simple, and professional. No need for a face-to-face interaction that might make things awkward. She took the elevator to the 15th floor, clutching the garment bag. The executive level was quieter than the creative department, with thick carpeting that muffled sound and artwork that probably cost more than her annual salary. A polished reception desk sat in front of a pair of imposing wooden doors. The woman behind the desk looked up as Natalie approached. She was probably in her 50s, with sharp eyes and an air of efficient competence. "Can I help you?" "Hi, I'm Natalie Rivers from the creative department. I need to return something to Jonathan. To Mr. Hayes." Natalie felt her cheeks warm at the slip. The assistant's eyebrows rose slightly. "Mr. Hayes mentioned you might stop by. Go right in. He's between meetings." Natalie's carefully laid plan crumbled. "Oh, I can just leave it with you. He specifically said to send you in when you arrived." The assistant's expression softened into something that might have been amusement. "Don't worry, he doesn't bite." Taking a deep breath, Natalie knocked on the wooden door. Jonathan's voice called out for her to enter, and she pushed the door open with a slightly shaking hand. The office was exactly what she would have expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the city. Modern furniture in dark wood and leather created an atmosphere of understated luxury. Awards and framed campaign posters decorated one wall, showcasing the agency's impressive history. Jonathan stood by the windows, his back to her, phone pressed to his ear. He wore a navy suit today, perfectly tailored to his tall frame. When he heard her enter, he turned, and his eyes met hers immediately. Something flickered across his face before he composed his features into a neutral expression. "I'll call you back in 5 minutes," he said into the phone and ended the call. "Natalie, come in." She walked further into the office, suddenly hyper-aware of every movement. "I brought your jacket. Thank you again for lending it to me." "You could have kept it longer." I didn't want to impose. I held out the garment bag, but he made no move to take it. "Set it on the chair. How are you feeling today?" "I'm fine, completely recovered from my rainy disaster." I tried to keep her tone light. Jonathan walked closer, and Natalie felt her pulse quicken. He stopped a few feet away, studying her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "It wasn't a disaster," he said quietly. "Just an unfortunate circumstance. That you had to rescue me from? I'm sure you had better things to do than play chauffeur to a junior designer." His jaw tightened. "Stop doing that." "Doing what?" "Diminishing yourself. You're not just a junior designer. You're a talented professional who had a difficult moment and handled it with grace." Natalie felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I was standing in the lobby looking like a drowned mess. That's not exactly graceful." "You held your head up. You didn't cry or make a scene. You maintained your dignity despite being uncomfortable and embarrassed. That takes strength." He paused, his eyes searching hers. I was impressed. The air between them felt charged, electric. Natalie knew she should thank him and leave, but her feet would not move. She was caught in his gaze, in the warmth of his words, in the realization that he had been paying attention to details she thought no one else had noticed. "I should get back to work," she managed to say. "Natalie, wait." Jonathan ran his hair through his hair, a gesture that made him look unexpectedly vulnerable. "I'm probably going to regret saying this, but I can't stop thinking about yesterday." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I have